Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Oh, welcome back, Birdland, to another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Benny Becker. Got a fantastic episode for you folks today. We got to catch you up on last night's game. It did not go our way. The series opener in Kansas City didn't go our way, gang, but there were some positives that I want to highlight. There were also some negatives I want to highlight. I want to kind of bring up the bullpen. I have some stats on them as a whole, but also I want to highlight two of the relievers that came in last night in Tate and Akin. And kind of, even though last night wasn't their best outings for either of them, they've had a pretty nice start to the season. So I do want to highlight that because they're kind of secondary pieces for this bullpen that have been showing promise at being top-end bullpen pieces for this team. So I do want to touch on them. I believe I owe an apology to Ramon Urias. We did this a few episodes ago with Craig Kimbrell. So today I have apologies to Ramon Urias. I do believe that they are in order. Next, also another guy that's struggling, Austin Hays, seems to also kind of be heating up a little. So we want to touch on Hazy. And we know he's had a tough start to his season. Another guy with a tough start to his season was Jackson Holliday. We'll touch on him and can talk about how his struggles are kind of continuing. And we'll pick up from last episode when we were talking about kind of the path moving forward for Jackson Holliday and where I see it personally and where I think the Orioles should be at. Certainly, I don't know where their minds are at fully, but I think I got a good idea and a good feel for it. Also on last episode, picking up from there, we talked a lot about these home run stats for the Orioles. Well, I got another one for you today. I'm excited to share. Also, I'm excited to share. I don't know if I heard it. I wasn't able to listen to the game last night. I was watching every pitch, but I just wasn't able to listen because I was in a crowded bar. So it was one of these things where I don't know if this nickname for the hydration station is just my thinking, or if this is out there already. If not, very excited to get to a nickname for the hydration station, at least in certain circumstances like we saw last night. I want to highlight how important it is for Corbin Burnes to come out and really dominate today in his start, this game 2 tonight, and it's very, very important that we get this one. And I'm going to touch on that as well. We want to highlight Kyle Bradish and talk a little more about his rehab schedule and keep you up to date on that. And I think I'm going to end it on talking about Norfolk. We haven't talked about them in a little while, and I'm going to inform you why. But a lot of guys remain hot down on the farm, and so there are some things I want to mention, including highlighting Heston and giving him his flowers today. All right, so picking up last night, or in fact, before we pick up last night, I did want to make this point. It is episode 21, gang, the Nick Markakis of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. That's how I will think of 21. I know Austin Hays wears it now. I know Jimmy Key wore it in the 90s. In fact, the jersey I have on is a game-worn Jimmy Key spring training jersey. There's a 21 on the back. And it doesn't have his name. It just has the number. But one of the things I love is Nick Markakis was always one of my favorite Orioles. And still, historically, one of my favorite Orioles of my lifetime. I absolutely loved Nicky Markakis from the time he came up all the way through. I was devastated that we didn't re-sign him and have him be an Oriole for life. I know it might have gotten a little rocky, his relationship with the Orioles around that time. I'm really hoping that, especially with the new ownership and the team's success, Nick Markakis can continue to be more a part of the Orioles fold moving forward, because I love Nicky Markakis. Awesome dude, it seems like, and a heck of a player. Was always my guy. So while this is literally a Jimmy Key jersey, again, it doesn't have his name on it, just has the number. And for most of my life, when I wore this jersey, or at least in the last 15 to 20 years, when I put on this jersey, I wore it as a Nick Markakis jersey. And even still, while I love Austin Hays, and we'll talk about Austin Hays later, this is still always kind of will be a Nick Markakis jersey to me, personally. So just wanted to touch on that, just get it out of the way. I know it's stupid, but these little things that I'm enjoying in the process of doing them, and sometimes, heck, I forget to get it out. I even had Nick Markakis written down on the top of my paper, and I almost still forgot. So it happens, gang. Lot to touch on. That's why I forget some things. But let's jump right into it. Again, last night's game, series opener against the Royals, did not go our way. Ended up losing 9-4, kind of a blowout. But it didn't really have the feel of a blowout for many parts of it. I feel like only for a certain period, a couple times in the game, it felt like blowouts. And frankly, the Orioles offense, we see this time and time again, in recent weeks at least, where the offense just starts off slow. I know we saw a couple games last series where the offense started off hot. I think game 2 and 3, they each scored quickly. But overall, a lot of these Orioles games have kind of gone this way, where the Orioles don't do much against the other team's starting pitchers, and really through 6 innings, usually are getting shut out or barely putting up any runs. And it's really been that 7 through 9 innings-wise that they've really dominated. And I believe statistically, I know coming into the last couple days, they were one of the best teams from the 7th inning on offensively, and really just in general, even run differential-wise, if not the best. Obviously, I think run differential might not have improved necessarily last night at that point. But overall, the Orioles continue to show the ability to not give up on games and to continue hitting late into games, even if they've started off slow. And that is very tough for baseball teams to stay in the right mindset and trust the process enough when you're not succeeding as a whole team. It's easy enough when one guy in the lineup is struggling, but everybody else seems to be hitting. Okay, we have the right approach. We have the right plan. Let's stick to it. Even the guy that's not getting a hit that day. But it's really tough when every guy in the lineup seems to not be getting hits and to stick with it, especially if you're not getting hits and then you fall behind big. A lot of teams just kind of pack it in and say, this is not our day, gang. Orioles are not that team, and we will continue to touch on that in a little bit. Just want to run you through the game, though. The Royals kind of took a while to get going as well. They put up 1 in the 4th, then they put up 5 in the 6th. That inning got ugly. The next inning, they extended it with 3 in the 7th. All of those runs, all 9 runs last night, were with 2 outs. So this is going to be something we touch on when we look at the positives and negatives, but essentially, to put it quickly, the Orioles could have very easily won that game. Not only did they have opportunities offensively to do more, but with 2 outs, 9 runs on 2 outs, like, you need to get out of innings. And whether it was Dean Kremer, Keegan Akin, or Dylan Tate, as we'll get to, none of them seem to be able to truly get out of innings like that, okay? And that's going to hurt you. That's going to kill you, usually, in games when that happens. Now, to dig into Dean Kremer a little bit, he had 5 2/3 innings, only gave up 3 earned of those 9, right? He only gave up 2 hits and 3 walks, so more walks than you'd like to see, but only 2 hits. So base runners-wise, I mean, 5 guys through 5 2/3, that's solid, if not close to elite, truly, statistically. Only 3 Ks. I think Dean showed that he had a lot of battle and a lot of heart. Now, he did leave, I believe, the bases loaded when he left the game. At the very least, I think there were 2 runners in scoring position when he left that game. And that's when it tended to get ugly, because Keegan Akin gave up 3 earned, Dylan Tate gave up 3 earned, and 3 of the runs that Dean Kremer gave up in the game, earned runs that were credited to him, 2 of which happened after he was pulled. That was given up by Keegan Akin. So really, Dean Kremer himself only gave up 1 of those 3 earned runs. Listen, man, again, if you can't get outs and out when you have 2 outs and they have runners on, it's probably going to come back to bite you, naturally. But again, Dean Kramer had himself a solid day, I believe. Even if it wasn't his most outstanding and dominant day, still good numbers, man. And he didn't leave the game in a spot that he wanted to leave it. It wasn't a position that put the team in a great position to get out of. But again, with the damage being done with 2 outs, you are in a position to get out of it without giving up any of those runs, let alone most of those runs. Okay? Now, when you look at Keegan Akin and Dylan Tate, and again, we're going to touch on them a little more later in the episode as far as not just last night, but their season as a whole, because last night wasn't indicative of how they've played so far. But they each gave up 3 earned runs. So the 3 pitchers between Kramer, Akin, and Tate each gave up 3 earned. Tate did his in an innings pitch. Akin only got out of a third of an inning. Again, only came in with 2 outs before he was able to, he gave up the runs and then finally get out. Between Akin and Tate, though, neither one had a strikeout. They gave up a combined 7 hits with 1 walk. Just way too many base runners for an inning and a third pitched. 8 base runners between that inning and a third. Whereas, again, you look at Dean Kramer, through 5 2/3, only gave up 5 base runners. I'm just saying, gang. Like, Akin and Tate both know that that was not good enough. And Adley Rutschman touched on it. I don't have the exact quote, but essentially that everyone still believes in those guys and that they've seen how great of pitchers they actually are and can be. Or maybe not great, but like how absolutely productive and solid pitchers both of them are. And in fact, Dylan Tate might be great. Keegan Akin, I think, has a lot less chance at being great, but can be very above average. And we've seen that earlier this year. Again, we will get back to those two. In fact, I love the idea Tate and Akin sounds like a law firm to me. Tate and Akin, attorneys at law. Kind of has a nice ring to it, or like a sitcom, Tate and Akin. Anyway, Adley kind of got us back in the game, or did get us back in the game, after 3 straight leadoff singles to start off the 7th. Adley came up with 2 outs and hit a grand slam, his first of the career. Now, the good in that is Adley gets this big moment, home grand slam, driving in 4 runs, making the game 6-4 at that time. Another good thing is that it didn't happen at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, ironically. Out of the 30 ballparks, 29 of them would have been a home run. The only ballpark in all of baseball that it wouldn't have been a home run for Adley Rutschman last night was Camden Yards and getting over that great wall of Baltimore in left. But the negative in it is that we had bases loaded with nobody out, man. Like, 2 guys, neither of which could even hit it deep enough to drive in a run before Adley came up and did his thing with 2 outs. Now, thankfully, even though it didn't matter in the ultimate grand scheme of it, thankfully, Adley was able to hit that home run and get us back in it. Because, again, cut the lead to 6-4. But what do you think happens if, I don't know, Gunnar or Jackson are able to get even a hit, keep it moving, and then that home run happens and now it's 6-5. Again, maybe that wouldn't have made the difference last night, how everything else shook out. But again, with giving up 9 runs with 2 outs, every run could matter. You know what I mean? Like, every run could have mattered. And you want to see them be able to accomplish these things in those situations, even though they have been pretty good in those situations thus far this season, I believe. Now, earlier in the game, you want to talk about missed opportunities. The Orioles did have it loaded again. This time, I believe it was only with 1 out they got it loaded. But still, and you had 2 guys coming up that, while young and relatively in the grand scheme of it, inexperienced, have been maybe 2 of their most, or definitely 2 of their most productive hitters so far this year in Westberg and Cowser. Okay? And the problem there is with 1 out, Cowser struck out. And with 2 outs, Westberg struck out. And the Orioles got nothing out of it. And that really stunk. Truly. Like, it sucks. Because, again, every run could have counted. And think about what, if it was another grand slam, great. But, like, think about just like the scenario of, again, a base hit there, another base knock by one of those, or both of those guys. And then before you know it, Adley's grand slam maybe tied it. Or obviously that changes the order later in the game, and who knows the scenarios. But the point is, maybe the Orioles do come back again and win that game. So it's not going to go our way every night. Not every one of those situations we're going to capitalize on. There's never going to be the scenario where these Orioles play perfect baseball, because you can't play perfect baseball. It's an imperfect game. Or it's a perfect game of imperfections, if you will. I don't know how you want to phrase it. Either way, these Orioles continue to mash in the 7th inning and later. And it's a great sign because guess what? If you're looking to make this postseason push, this World Series push, you're going to need to be able to hit in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning against those teams' best relievers when they're trying to shut you down and they're trying to extend the game. You need to be able to get those base hits, and the Orioles have shown that time and time again, because there's going to be plenty of postseason games where your team is starting off offensively tough. Can't hit the starting pitcher for 5, 6, 7 innings. All I'm saying is these Orioles have shown great promise in that back half of the ball game on both ends of the ball. So very exciting, and again, we'll talk more about positives a little bit later. The game ended up getting out of control. It was 6-4. Orioles then gave up a 3-run home run. That one was Dylan Tate's, and that made it 9-4. Really kind of called it, sealed it at that point pretty much. These Orioles obviously don't give up, but at that point, it just probably wasn't their night, and they knew it. Now, Gunnar came into the game with 3 straight games with a home run. He ended up almost going Yahtzee in the 9th to make it 4 straight, which would have been cool. Another stat that the Orioles had going into the game is, I believe it was 4 straight games with 3 or more home runs. They were looking for 5, and they did not get it. They had the Adley home run, but that was the only one of the day. Okay, so unfortunately, both those come to an end. So does the winning streak. But that's all right. We can get right back to the grindstone tonight. I saw positives and I saw some negatives. We're going to start with the positives of that loss, right? So the number one thing is something we just were talking about, which is that this team does not quit. They look at basically any situation, even down 5, 6 runs, as a game they're still right back in it. They understand, and they talked about it last night after the game, is that games can change very quickly. You're down 6-0, 3 singles and a home run later, 6-4, and you're in a real ball game now. So things happen very quickly in this game. The Orioles know if you keep sticking with it and staying in that game mentally and continuing to grind and do everything you can to win that ball game and not just letting the game go by the wayside because it seems like it's not your day, you're going to wind up picking up more victories. And that's something that they're going to continue to do all this season. And really, I can't see it not moving forward. In fact, it reminds me so much of a simple Oriole way mentality. Truly, just doing the right things, continuing to work, continuing to hustle, play good defense, get on base best you can, hit a home run with 2 guys on. Like, that's Oriole baseball. And continuing to believe in that Oriole magic. And it's there. This team has that Oriole magic. And it's a beautiful thing to see, even on days where it doesn't go our way. So that was the number one thing positive that I really took away, and I continue to take away. Again, this team leads baseball in comeback victories already this season. I believe they're at 8. And some of those maybe aren't the most impressive comeback victories. Like, again, opening day, we fall down 1-0 because Trout hit a home run in the top of the first. We then score 11 unanswered. So, okay, comeback victory, technically, but it's not like one of these games in Boston or that game against Milwaukee, or whatever it may be that we really did have to scrape, claw, grind our way back into the game, come back and win that game, right? So the second one is Dean Kremer, and really just the starting pitchers as a whole, even though they might not all have great outings. And I don't need Dean Kremer to have unbelievable outings every time. I just need consistently solid. And frankly, Dean came into the season saying he wanted to pitch 200 innings, right? That was one of his goals this season. And so far, he's really been doing that. We know he pitched 7 the other day, 5 2/3. You basically have to average 6 innings over that course of a whole season to get to 200. I mean, I don't know if he's directly on pace. I haven't done the math, but essentially, as long as he stays in this rotation and continue pitching solid, which he did, I really love it. Like, they don't let the fact that they give up a solo home run in one inning deter them from going back out the next one and continuing to pitch well. And then, yes, he didn't leave the game how he wanted to leave the game, right? He would have ideally loved to get out of that inning himself with no runs or maybe just 1 run. And it is what it is, right? You're not always going to leave the team in the best position to stay in the game. However, he left it in a better position than where Akin left it. And again, everybody has a bad night, but that's just the fact of it. So that was a positive, is just Dean Kremer and how this rotation continues to be solid and continues to fight and really get through at least 5 almost every single game, which is so important and something that for a while I feel like we weren't guaranteed. While some guys would be up and down and their ups would be great and they would pitch 5 2/3, 6, 7 innings, their bads would be an inning and a third. We're not really getting that outlier so far this season. And so while it's not much, I guess, to ask for the bare minimum of a guy to get through like 5 innings, still, it's nice to be able to see that these guys continue to take that step towards consistency, towards reliability, and be able to just put in these numbers to grind through these starts to give a guy like Dean Kremer a chance to get 200 innings this season. Because you're not going to get there unless you're pitching consistently solid and continuing to get out of these innings more often than not, especially when you get into jams. Okay? Now, the last positive I'll highlight, and really I highlighted 3 positives and 3 negatives from last night's loss. So another positive is something I mentioned towards the beginning of this, is that the Orioles really, while losing by 5, were close to winning that game, right? It's funny because sometimes there's like a 2-0 game or you lose by 2 runs, 3-1, and you were never really close to winning that game, right? The other team might have gotten those 3 runs quick, or at least 4th, 5th inning kind of got that lead. Maybe you scraped one across in the 9th, but it was never really close. You weren't hitting, you weren't getting guys on base. That wasn't necessarily the case. Now, the Orioles didn't have the most hits last night, but they had enough to keep them in that ball game. Again, they leave the bases loaded in an inning where they had 2 guys with this bases loaded opportunity who couldn't capitalize in Cowser and Westberg. It is what it is. Yeah, you get the bases loaded again and capitalize with a grand slam on that. But Gunnar, almost with, I believe it was a 2-run home run, possibly just a solo shot in the 9th that came up just short. That would have been 1 or 2 more runs. The pitching, giving up 9 runs with 2 outs, all 9 runs with 2 outs. That right there, again, you just get out of these innings before you give up those multi-runs. Akin comes in. Okay, he gives up the 2 runs that go to Dean Kremer. Maybe he gives up another one himself, but gets out with only 1 earned against him instead of 3. I mean, that right there is huge. That right there makes it 7-4. And again, maybe Gunnar has that home run, and it's now 7-5 or 7-6. And then guess what? Maybe Westberg or Cowser could have gotten a single in that inning, or both of them kept it rolling. And before you know it, it was a tie game to an Orioles win. So it's asking a lot, but at the same time, it's something that I feel like this team was so close to doing last night. And they had a vibe after that grand slam where it really felt like it was going to happen. And then again, it just snuck away from them right after. And that's going to happen sometimes. It's going to happen. Not every day is going to go your way. My dad always had a saying, and it's a famous saying. He didn't invent it. I'm not sitting here claiming he invented it. But that the sun don't shine on the same dog's ass every day. It's true. In fact, I got in trouble one time in Little League for telling that to a kid that struck out, or the whole team, I think I announced it to when we lost a game, trying to cheer him up. Parents did not like it. I was probably like 8 years old, 9 years old, maybe a little older, but maybe not, honestly. So yeah, listen, guys, it happens. So we're going to highlight a couple of the negatives, and it's funny, one of the negatives actually has some positives tangled into it because I have some stats that kind of intertwine with it, right? So the negatives, obviously, last night was the bullpen. I mean, two of your three relievers that came in each gave up 3 earned runs. One of them technically gave up 5 runs, just 2 of them were credited to the starter. All of them happening with 2 outs. I mean, you need better. You need better pitching. And Brandon Hyde talked about that after last night's game. And he was confident that they would be able to provide, and they usually do provide, better pitching. But you just need to do a better job at getting an out with 2 outs. Getting out of the inning when you have 2 outs before innings get away from you, right? So that was the first negative that really stuck out to me because I think it's the most obvious one. And I don't think it's a negative as far as the grand scheme of these Orioles, but I do think it's a negative in some regards. And so I have 2 numbers, or really 3 numbers, but it's funny. 2 of them highlight the good in the Orioles bullpen, and 1 highlights the bad in the Orioles bullpen. And it's kind of interesting, right? So as far as the bad goes, because that's kind of what stems from this, the negatives that I saw last night. The Orioles bullpen has the 7th worst percentage at stranding runners. So they're only stranding 63.4% of the runners that they face when they're in the game. Now, I'm not 1,000% sure what this stat takes into consideration, but I don't believe it's one of these expected value stats. In which case, I would assume that it's literally just if you have a reliever in the game and there's a man on base, does he come to score or does he not? Does he stay stranded? I think that that's essentially all that the number takes into account. In which case, I would argue part of the reason that we're 7th worst is because I would assume that our relievers as a whole have done a very good job at keeping guys off of base. Because the Orioles haven't really walked anybody this year. They haven't been bad in the walk column as far as pitching goes. So we're not allowing as many free passes as a normal team would. And most of these guys have had really good outings. And a lot of outings where they don't even give up a hit. Just look at Craig Kimbrell. I know he's had, I think, 2 outings where he's given up hits. I think the rest of them, he's been hitless. So it could be something as simple as when a guy does get on, yeah, he, not more often than not, but a third of the time, give or take, I guess he scores. But we're getting less guys on base than a typical team would. That's what I see in that number. Because also, and I think these 2 numbers back up that sentiment about sometimes numbers can be deceiving, right? Because, again, it's simple math. If you have, let's say, 100 guys in that stat, and 63 of those guys don't score, well, 36 of them or 37 of them did score. But if you have 10 guys instead of those 100, and the same number you had the same number, it would be 6 or 7 guys, 6 guys, you know what I mean, that scored of those, or didn't score of those 10. So you only let in 4. So, you know what I mean? It's just one of these things where could be deceiving, that number, right? So the two statistics that I feel like back up how good the Orioles bullpen has been is their top 10 in bullpen ERA and top 3 in FIP, which is a number that I had to look up to see what it meant, because I didn't just want to come on here and say FIP and just move on and have you go, what the heck is FIP? So I'm going to do my best, because it's a relatively confusing stat in some ways, even though it's also kind of simplistic. But essentially, it's your expected ERA, okay? What your ERA would be expected to be if all things were equal, as far as, I think, luck, as far as like a player's speed. So let's say on an infield hit, a player might have gotten a single out of that, and then come around to score because of it. But if he had an average MLB speed, he wouldn't have gotten that single. You would have thrown him out, and thus he wouldn't have been around to score, right? So I believe that's like a simplistic number of FIP. But again, Orioles are top 3 in that FIP, expected ERA for that bullpen, and top 10 in actual bullpen ERA. So again, I just don't think the Orioles have allowed many base runners, and that's why maybe that seventh worst at stranding runners stat is a little misleading. Okay? Now, I also think a credit is usually the Orioles starters don't leave a game like Dean Kramer left it last night, with with runners in scoring position and a bunch of guys on and eligible to have 2 guys score, right? Usually that's not what they're doing. They're usually getting out of these innings. They're usually powering through, ending the innings, or at the very least leaving the game with maybe 1 man on, right? So I think, and again, that could go into it also. If the Orioles starters are typically leaving a game with let's say 1 man on. If they're leaving an inning, mid-inning, there's typically 1 man on. Well, then your ERA can still be pretty good even if that guy scores, because that doesn't go to your earned run. That goes to the starting pitcher's earned run. And that also could wind up resulting in you letting him score eventually, thus stranding less runners. I don't know. Still very early in the season. Sometimes these things need to shake out. And ultimately, a lot of the things we're talking about need time to shake out, right? So the next thing, as far as a negative I saw, is something we really talked very first about, which was the Orioles offense just kind of lacking early. Now, there have certainly been games where they keyed up early and they're hitting a lot of dingers or getting a lot of runs in the first, second, third inning. But at least the past few weeks, it seems just a constant reoccurrence where this team doesn't hit for 5-6 innings and then decides, hey, let's turn it on. And I don't know what to think of that necessarily. I really don't. I want to be optimistic again and look at the positive of hitting later in the game is very important later in the season and in the postseason. So it's great that they're showing that ability. It's just kind of worrisome that it seems some time to really get going in a lot of these series. And maybe it has something to do with just the competition being better than maybe we expected in this first 36 game span. The Royals certainly have had really good pitching. We're going to see that today, tomorrow. We saw that yesterday. In fact, the pitcher yesterday basically shut us down now for 2 straight games. Won 7 innings, I think, the first time. This time, I think, through like 5 or 6 innings, something like that. But yeah, it's not something that I'm terrified of, because I truly believe at times it's more random. Baseball is like that, because certainly in those early innings, a lot of times we're still hitting the ball hard. It's just usually right at guys, shifted, whatever it may be. Coming just short of the wall, maybe in the summer, those balls get out. I don't know. But certainly it wasn't a positive last night, because it put us in a big hole. We were trying to get back, and we just couldn't, because, again, we let them score more and not taking care of those opportunities when they presented themselves earlier, and not having that offense be able to establish itself and put up runs and get on the board in those first 6 innings, ultimately, I think came back to bite us, man. Ultimately, it did. And the last negative, I think, is kind of continuing off of that, but just the missed opportunities again. Now, I feel like, done very well, and I didn't look up the exact stat, but done very well this season with hitting with runners in scoring position. I know at least at a certain point we were very good statistically at it. As far as rankings go, I think still we are. But it's just one of these things I'm not thrilled about seeing missed opportunities. And you're not going to do it every single time. And it is what it is. You know what I mean? But overall, I think these Orioles have done a very good job at taking advantage throughout this season. And last night was just one of the situations where we didn't fully capitalize on it. Now, obviously, Rushman did, but nobody else was able to. Cowser, Westberg, and, just guys throughout the game. Just not being able to get on base or not being able to string some hits together. It sucks. It sucks when you have those opportunities to put up a big inning and you don't capitalize on it. Now, next thing I'm going to talk about is the law firm of Tate and Akin. We know last night they each gave up 3 earned runs. But before last night, they each had very good starts to their season. And Dylan Tate was kind of this stud reliever prospect for us. Really thought he would be our closer at one point a couple years ago. In fact, may have been our closer, I think, at one point a couple years ago. But then got hurt, is coming back from that, has electric stuff, and we have seen that. Coming into last night, though, he's had 6 appearances, 7 innings total, only gave up 1 run before last night. Again, last night he gave up 3 earned runs. But Keegan Akin, who, again, was this pitching prospect we heard a bunch about, kind of bounced between starter, reliever, one of those guys that we didn't know where he would fit exactly. Orioles have given him a few tries in the majors, including last year, coming off a hot camp, when he came up to the majors and got shelled instantly, thus getting sent back down, ended up getting hurt, never really returned. Okay? Keegan Akin, though, coming into last night, again, he had a very hot camp this year, again, made the team as that third lefty, now second lefty with Cionel Perez out. And coming into this game through 8 appearances, 8 2/3 innings, he's only given up 2 earned runs. Again, now those numbers jump instantly because add 3 to each of those guys after last night. But still, very good stuff we've seen from Tate and Akin. And we already have such great relievers towards the back end of this bullpen. Kimbrel has truly looked phenomenal so far this year. Cano has looked great mostly as well. Danny Colomb looks like the picking up right from last year has done great as well. So that's really like the big 3 in our bullpen. So to add Tate and Akin, and then you can add some other names as they come. Cionel Perez when he gets healthy. You also have, Jacob Webb is very iffy and possibly losing it. Brian Baker, I think, is already in the minors. I don't think he's still with this team, but he's shown some decent stuff. And then you also have Big Mike Bauman, who I like. Plus, you might add 1, if not 2 of these names from the rotation. Hell, if not 3 of these names in the rotation to this bullpen at some point. In Wells, Irvin, Suarez, and I think he'll probably keep the 5th spot when everyone's healthy, but Kramer. So imagine that talent, okay? Pick 2 or 3 of those guys I just mentioned. Add them to Keegan Akin and Dylan Tate, who have, before last night, looked great. Add them to Danny Colomb and Yennier Cano, who have looked great for at least a season plus now. Add that to Craig Kimbrel, who is one of the best relievers in Major League history, even though towards the end of it. That's a very strong bullpen, gang. That is a very, very strong bullpen that should pretty much all be there healthy. Oh, and I didn't even mention Cionel Perez also. Add Cionel Perez to that, healthy also. Out of nowhere, that's a top major league bullpen in baseball, truly. And I think that that's what we're going to have. Already we have pretty much that, but especially once Bradish and Means get back, push a couple guys out of the rotation. Maybe you add Tyler Wells. Maybe you add Albert Suarez. Out of nowhere, again, Cionel Perez comes back. Boom. Out of nowhere, that's maybe the scariest bullpen in baseball as a whole. And gives Brandon Hyde and Drew French a lot of options in those games moving forward. So, gotta get some good coffee. Got good coffee today, gang. It's amazing when you have, like, really good, like, local coffee, not like Starbucks or something. And those are good. Starbucks, Dunkin'. You know I like my Dunkin', but I don't know, just a little shop. Great stuff, gang. Great stuff. Good coffee is great. Gotta love it. So, the next thing I want to talk about is, we did this a couple episodes ago with Craig Kimbrell. Today I'm giving my apologies to Ramon Urias. I was kind of calling for the man's job very early this season. We know he didn't necessarily have an exact starting role, so he wasn't getting that many opportunities. In fact, when I look back today, I thought his hit list streak to start the season was like double the amount of games than it actually was. It actually was only like 4 or 5 games. Made me feel really bad for calling for this man's job. And again, I love Ramon Urias. If you go back to our spring training episodes, I was talking about Ramon Urias as being a big X factor for this team as a whole, being in this utility role with his defense and his clutch hitting. But overall, we know he started very slow this season. And maybe I was a little too hasty to say, get rid of him, bring up Connor Norby. And I still would love Connor Norby. And frankly, I'm not going to say Ramon Urias is off the chopping block, but I said multiple times that the clock was ticking on him, and I apologize because clock slowed down a decent amount now for Ramon Urias. He's given himself some chances to stick on this team all season and be a piece for this team all season. And I do believe fully that this probably is his last year with the Orioles, one way or another. But I love Ramon Urias as a piece on this team. He's got his batting average up to 192 now after his 4th straight game with a hit. Now, again, he's not playing every day, but the 4th straight game with a hit, came in a pinch hit opportunity too last night, which was even nicer. Came in for Jackson Holliday, ended up getting a base hit. He's gotten a base hit in 5 of his last 6 games that he's gotten a plate appearance in. Still no multi-hit games. All of those 5 games, only a single hit when he's had it. But again, like last night, it's not like he had 4 or 5 at-bats like he has in other games. He only had, I believe, 2 at-bats. So, ultimately, I want to apologize to Ramon Urias and say, I do want you on this team, and I do think you're a good piece and a nice piece to have. And I want you to continue succeeding. I want you to be this big role player for us. And certainly, God forbid, if somebody goes down and gets hurt, he's the type of player that can come in, start playing every day, and really not have a significant drop in production. Although I also believe that we have other younger internal options who could fill that role as well, maybe just as well, offensively at least. But I think there's something to trusting his defense out there, especially now that Holliday's up, that defense at second maybe weakens a little. Westberg, while he's had some great defensive plays over at third, also has some plays where, not a perfect third baseman. So we'll see what happens, gang. We'll see what happens. Overall, I just want to apologize to Ramon Urias and clear the air. He's back in some good graces, has a lot more time to prove himself. And another guy who got off to a horrid start, but is starting to show signs of his old self, is Austin Hayes. Now, he got a hit in the first 2 games of the season, but really then went on a long stretch where he wasn't getting any hits. Now, him, just like Ramon, has lost playing time because of how well other guys are playing. Frankly, guys like Colton Cowser is in a pretty much everyday role. Luckily for Hayes, Cowser can float between all three outfield positions, buying some guys days. Though Ryan O'Hearn and Ryan Mountcastle have performed so well that both of them seem to be in the lineup damn near every day, pushing O'Hearn a lot to right field. So on a day Santander's off. So it's just one of these things is Austin Hayes has not had a full opportunity to work himself out of this. And we talked last episode about the collection of Orioles, I believe with 4 or maybe it was 5 plus home runs already. And I said that if Austin Hayes had everyday playing time really this whole season, he might be up there too, because he might have gotten himself out of that slump earlier and put up some power numbers. Overall, though, he's not out of the weeds yet. I believe he's still batting under 100. He did get a hit last night. I believe it was his only plate appearance. Again, pinch hitting, just like Urias. But he's been looking better because he's had a few balls that he's absolutely smoked. And it was like right at the third baseman or right at the left fielder, or a guy makes a great play on the ball. And so he's had some bad luck early in the season as well, which should tell you there should be some positive regression coming as far as that luck. He has had a hit in 2 of his last 4 games with a plate appearance. He's also kind of been coming in these situations just for defense, kind of to get Santander out of the game, get Austin Hayes in there for a better outfield, move Cowser maybe over to right, whatever it may be. Ultimately, I think Austin Hayes works it out and gets himself back to being the Austin Hayes we know he is. Again, he's been hitting the ball hard, just like a lot of these Orioles. Just necessarily hasn't had the luck that some of these other Orioles have had about those hard hit balls not being right at guys. Hits in 2 of the last 4 games of the plate appearances, starting to turn it on. I feel like good things are coming from Austin Hayes coming. I really do. He seems like his timing is better than it was early this season when he was kind of out in front and just not seeing the ball great. So now we're going to end this kind of struggle trio, if you will call him, with Jackson Holliday. We talked Urias, we talked Hayes. Now we want to talk about Jackson Holliday and how his struggles are just continuing, right? At this point, he has 27 plate appearances, 15 Ks, I believe 1 walk, 1 hit. I mean, only 2 games without multi-strikeouts in it for him. Now, I don't want to overreact. At no point am I questioning how much still of a tremendous talent he is, or even how tremendously successful I see him being in the major leagues over the course of his career, and very soon. But right now, it just is not there. We do see maybe a little more confidence than we saw early on, especially when he was looking for that first hit. I think I see a little more joy in his playing, but now he's in this slump again, looking for this second hit, maybe even longer than he was looking for that first hit, or just as long pretty much. So it's just one of these things, like, you can tell how badly he wants to succeed. And we've seen opportunities where he hits a ball in a gap or gets it deep to right field where he just got it off the end of the bat a little. His timing just doesn't look exactly there. But, guys, he's only had 8 games in the major leagues also. 8 games, right? I don't want to overreact to essentially a week of baseball. A week and a half of baseball, right? Like, you can't do that to the young man. He's too good, he's too talented, and he's too good of a person for us to ride him, and we're really not at all. Oriole Nation stepped up. Birdland stepped up and continued to applaud this man and love this man. And at no point are we getting on him or booing him, because we know that ain't helping. We know that's not what he needs. We want him to be great, and he's going to be great for us. Again, only 8 games in, man. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's not going to stick. But we talked about that last episode. So kind of the plan I have in my mind is I'm giving him this Kansas City series. There's 2 more games, including tonight of it. I'm giving him the LA series after this. When we come back home, we have a 3-game set against Oakland, right? So that's 8 games between the rest of this Royals series, the Angels series, and the Oakland series. Kansas City's pitching has been pretty good this year. I think their bullpen has been hit around a lot. LA, their pitching, I think, has been better than people expected, but it certainly isn't great. And we know Oakland is kind of the dog of Major League Baseball right now. And despite the fact that they've won more games than people would expect, you truly expect them to kind of go to the tank, especially on a long East Coast trip to Baltimore. The Orioles should be able to sweep that Oakland series, okay? So, again, you're not facing the best competition. And after that Oakland series, you have the New York Yankees coming in for a 4-game set. Personally, I'm going to give him through that Oakland series. I would consider giving him that Yankee series as well. But at that point, he's still sitting at 1 or even 2 hits at that point. And his strikeouts are just piling up to the point that they're more than half his at-bats, like they are now. I have to send him down. And it's not a detriment to him. It's not a death sentence to him. Again, you can understand now, back to the minors and understand exactly what you struggled with and work on those things. You've mastered the rest. You've mastered how to master AAA pitching. But what I need you to do is I need you to work on those little things that are beating you now in the major leagues, because you can do that. And we talked last episode, it may only take 2 more weeks in the minors. Give him that seasoning, 2 more weeks in the minors, and then he comes back up, and before you know it, is going on a tear through June and July. Because that's possible. 1,000% possible. It's also possible that he breaks out of it tonight or at some point in one of these 3 series and never looks back. Because that's what Adley did. That's what Gunnar did. Frankly, that's what Westberg did. All 3 of those guys struggled in the major leagues, but stuck around. I don't believe Westberg got sent down. I know Rushman and Gunnar didn't get sent down, and then excelled and thrived and became the player that we were told and thought that they would be. And that's what we're seeing continuing today with them. So they've never gone backwards, right? Once they took that step, it was there. And Jackson's going to be that same way. Heck, I think we've seen that with Cowser now. But Cowser was the other opposite end of it, where he had to go down to the minors. Again, he went down so late in the season that there was probably only like a few weeks to a month left. And I'm pretty sure he came back to Baltimore in those last couple of days, but just didn't play. So he didn't have a ton of time in that minors to work out what he failed on his first run in the majors. And I think Jackson Holliday would be very similar. He would only need a couple weeks, a month. And then it would be like, let's go, baby, ready to roll, putting up tremendous numbers. But I hope that these easier series start going his way. And really, he can take off and start hitting those extra base hits and home runs and get those steals and start looking a little more comfortable in the field, despite the fact that I think he has looked pretty comfortable for a guy that really never played second base. Overall, he needs more seasoning and he needs just confidence. That's the funny thing about baseball is if you get a couple base hits, that gives you the confidence to then go and play better defensively. Because you're not sitting in the field thinking about your at-bats the whole time and putting this stress and pressure on yourself. You're just playing freely, right? So I believe it will come. I believe he will stay in the majors, work it out, and stay in the majors. But the contingency plan truly is if after that Oakland series, and if you really want after that Yankee series, if he's only sitting at 1, 2, possibly even 3 hits and continuing to strike out immensely, I'm sorry. You got to go back down, man. It's not what anyone wants. It's not what anyone's hoping for. It's just the reality. And you need to bite that bullet, work on what you need to work on, keep your same attitude, keep your same work ethic that I know he will, and grind through that little last part of the minors to get to the point where you can come back up and demolish pitching and be a true scary piece in this lineup full of scary pieces. Because right now, as much as like when he comes up, I want to believe he's this scary piece, he's just not yet. And he'll get there, whether it's this season or next. By this time next year, this is not ever a thought or conversation. This is long in the past. Colton Cowser style. But I hope that it's more Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson style, where he just works through it in the majors and is able to get through. So we'll monitor it. We'll cross our fingers. We'll pray to God. And we'll hope for the best for Jackson Holliday to start hitting like a major leaguer that we know he can hit like I know he can hit like. So last episode, we had multiple stats about the Orioles offense and really home runs and how impressive they've been so far as a home run hitting team this season. Well, with Adley Rutschman's home run last night, it's now only the second time ever in franchise history the Orioles have 31 home runs through the first 19 games, okay? The only other time was 1966 when they won the World Series. So, make of that what you will, but again, we talk about the Oriole way, doing it the Oriole way. Small ball and 3-run home runs, baby. Just goes to show you. And we're hitting a lot of those home runs now, so you have to love it. Now, last night wasn't a 3-run home run. It was a grand slam, a 4-run home run. The first time with the hydration station that we've been able to witness all 4 hoses being hit at the same time. Very cool, very exciting, and it gave me inspiration for a nickname in those instances. And again, they might have said this on the broadcast. I wasn't able to listen to the game. They might have said this all over Birdland already. So excuse me if I'm sitting here pretending that I came up with it. But I haven't heard it, so for all I know, I did come up with it. And when there's a grand slam and all 4 players are hitting the hydration station, it is now known as the Quadration station. All right? Because all 4 Quadration station. And that's what we got to see last night. It's unfortunate it came in a loss, but I love the idea of this Quadration station. And frankly, we talked many times about how these are the best celebrations in baseball. This vibe and core the Orioles have going on is, I believe, absolutely the best in baseball and just the best vibe and feeling. And last night when you felt the Quadration station, when you saw that, you felt that, oh, these Orioles are coming back tonight, man. And they felt that. And again, it's not going to happen every night for them, but that is one of the things that I'm not going to say it drives them to never quit, but I would say that's one of the things that is a byproduct of them never quitting. They have this mentality, and then they hit this hydration station. They're like, yeah, we're coming back again, baby. This is what we do. And while they didn't do it last night, next time they probably will, because that's what this team does. So, whether it was named before this moment or not after the Grand Slam, after Grand Slams, it is now known as the Quadration Station. Quadration Station, brother. Get my sketch on. All right, so I really want to touch on how important tonight's game is. Game 2 in Kansas City. Corbin Burns on the bump. Now he's going up against a guy we saw in Baltimore the first time. Cole Regans, who has great stuff. It really is kind of a matchup of aces, if you will. Corbin Burns has to be that ace above an ace, right? He has to show this veteran ace, and this is one of the things we talked about, being able to stop the bleeding. Now, this is only a 1-game bleed, but tomorrow we have a tough matchup again. So we have Cole Irvin going against Seth Lugo, who this year is 3-0 with a 1.05 ERA. So this is just what I'm talking about. We need to win this second game because truly, if we lose tonight, there's a chance, at least, this team winds up getting swept in Kansas City. And I don't want to see that. That'll bring back nightmares of the ALCS years ago. But just this team is too good to be able to get swept like that by a team like the Royals. So this is why you bring in Corbin Burnes, because we need to dominate that game. And we need to make sure that he can give us 6, 7, heck, maybe even more, 8, 9, just saying, of 1 to 2 run baseball. And allowing this offense, if it does start slow again against Cole Regans, to be able to get the lead and ultimately win against the bullpen. And hopefully some of these guys can see Cole Regans a second time and really find a way to hit him. Listen, he's a young pitcher. So maybe you saw something that you knew you could take advantage of. Maybe these Orioles found a way that they can exploit Cole Regans. They're a very talented team. So don't be surprised if Corbin Burnes has like a 4-0 or 6-0 lead after 2-3 innings, right? And Cole Regans has a tough night. But we need that big game. Whether that happens early or not, we need this win tonight. And it is very, very important, especially looking at the next game matchup. Truly. And I like Cole Irvin, and he's put in solid days. But Seth Lugo has been pretty unhittable this year, and certainly pretty unscorable this year. Just one of these things, you want to ensure that you don't get swept. You want to give yourself a rubber match tomorrow to try and win this series, and that's what's so dang important, okay? Also, the Orioles, at the moment, knock on wood, I don't want to be a jinx. I almost didn't bring this up, but once it hit my brain to say it, I know it's written down, but once I decided I was going to say it, then I couldn't back off of it, because then I would be jinxing myself the other way. So at a certain point, you just have to say it and cross your fingers and hope that it stays this way. But so far, the Orioles have been perfect in games started by Corbin Burnes or Grayson Rodriguez. So you hope that continues tonight, and that won't continue all season, I'm sure, but hopefully tonight that trend continues so we can ensure that we don't get swept. We can give ourselves a chance at winning the series tomorrow, and it's a big game. I mean, they're all big games, but it's a big game. And again, winning today keeps us right on track to allow us to win 24 of the first 36 games, which we have said is so, so important. Now, looking ahead with that Oakland series, again, hopefully we can sweep them. So worst case, if we lose this one 2-3, or 2 out of 3, we can get it right back winning 3 out of 3 against Oakland. Hopefully. But hey, you got to do it. You got to win those games, and I believe we will. So exciting news. We talked about Kyle Bradish and his first rehab start and how well he did and how exciting it looked, because it looked like the 2023 Kyle Bradish. The velocity was there. The off-speed and breaking ball were there. So very exciting. We have his next scheduled start tomorrow on Sunday. Hopefully the weather stays good. I haven't looked, so it might be beautiful for all I know. I'm just saying because, you know, he may have had one canceled. I think his first one was canceled due to rain. So, again, you just want to get him out there in those situations. But it's very exciting. Kyle Bradish hitting the mound tomorrow, hopefully, for a second rehab start. Everything's been looking good. Everything we've been hearing is good. And getting him back as that third ace in this staff is all the more reason to love these Baltimore Orioles moving forward, gang. Now, I'm going to end it on some minor league talk. Yeah, it's been a few episodes. For a while, we had basically minor league talk of the day, topic of the day. We haven't had that in a few episodes, and really it was because Norfolk Tide, despite the fact that some players were continuing to statistically do really well, went on a 10-game skid. I mean, listen, I follow the Tide slightly as far as the player performances and stuff, but rarely am I looking at the box scores and trying to figure out the results. So I didn't even realize they were on a 10-game losing streak. But that all ended last night. Heston Kjerstad hit 2 more home runs. Cade Povich had yet another great game. He looks absolutely ready for the majors and is very exciting, especially moving forward with this season. He could be a guy that maybe even hits the bullpen for us this year in big-time opportunities. It's possible. Either way, Cade Povich is seriously looking like a rotation piece for the Orioles coming into next year, which is so exciting. Heston Kjerstad, though, literally would probably be on every single major league roster right now if he was in every franchise, but he's not on the Orioles because there just isn't that spot. The fact that Ryan O'Hearn's hitting so well, even Ryan Mountcastle, Tony Taters is hitting good enough. Like, this is where he would be playing first and right. So, like, Colton Cowser playing so well. It's just one of these things that he hasn't had the opportunity to come up to the majors this season and prove what he's proving at AAA this season. But let me just run you through his numbers through 19 games. Heston Kjerstad has 10 home runs, 30 RBIs. I mean, the man is an absolute machine. And I cannot wait and am so excited to somehow, some way, find him in the majors this season. And I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know the move that has to be made. I don't want to see anyone get injured, especially of those 3 guys, or 4 guys if you want to add Cowser. So because of that, I don't know. It's just one of these things. It's a shame that Heston can't come up here and do this yet for us. But God, it's exciting for when he actually does wind up coming up. So that's going to call it for our episode 21 of the Talkin Orioles baseball podcast. The Nick Markakis episode, we'll call it. And it was a good one, gang. Again, coming off a loss is never a fun thing. But there's always tonight. There's always tomorrow. It's a long, long season ahead. And these Orioles are put in the driver's seat to do a lot this season. So, again, tonight's a very important start for Corbin Burnes. Hopefully, he can shut the door, get us back on the winning track, give us a chance to win the series tomorrow in a rubber match on Sunday. Until then, we will see. We'll see what happens tonight. Fingers crossed. Really hoping for it. Heck, I kind of had a thought last night, and this is so random, but that Jackson Holliday's first home run is going to wind up in one of those fountains. So it's going to be waterlogged for the rest of his life. And I don't know why I had that vision, but I do. I didn't put any money on it. So if it happens, I don't have a ticket to show you with it. But I'm just saying, I feel like Jackson Holliday, whether tonight, tomorrow, might wind up with a home run in the fountains for his first major league home run. Just got a feeling. Just got a feeling. And once that kid starts clicking, I really think it just continues to roll and he becomes this huge productive product. And it's going to be a beautiful thing to see. And it's only a matter of time, gang. So, very exciting stuff. A lot of great positives from the Orioles, even on a losing night. And you love seeing it. So, that's how we're going to end the episode today, guys. Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I am Benny Becker. We'll see you next time. Let's go, O's!
Talking baseball, baseball.